When it comes to apologising, there's apologising and then there's apologising.
Which is true, and eventually it all boils down to how good you are and how honest you are when you're trying to apologize or you're just trying to apologize.
When was the last time you had to apologise to someone?
Oh, good question. Yeah, I do falter, and as human, when you falter, you err, you need to apologize, and you have to. And I can't really recollect when was it, but yeah, I'm sincere with my apologies.
And then there's sometimes, apologising too much. We've got that friend that's always, sorry, I'm sorry. And you tend to almost look down upon them. But more on how to make apologies, especially heartfelt apologies. We're joined by the psychiatrist and the wellness coach, Tulika Shukla, on the phone. Thank you very much for joining us, Doctor.
Hello. Good evening.
Good to speak to you. When it comes down to making apologies in any relationship, whether it's work life or professional life, how much of the apology is verbal and how much of the apology is in your non-verbal communication?
Yes, a very important aspect of apologizing is also the actions that follow. When you're speaking to somebody and when you're apologizing for what you did, verbally you have to acknowledge what you did wrong and say sorry. Then how apologetic you're looking is also very important. Or if you're rolling your eyes, or if you're like, yeah, I'm sorry. The tone you use, all of those things are very important. And the third aspect is that what are your actions following that? Apology basically means that I did a wrong behavior and I will correct that behavior. So it has to be followed with action.
When you say that, one has to apologize and, the body language, the tonality of how you say sorry also matters. But in this day of text communication where everything is on a text or a meme, I've seen so many times that I receive a sorry as an SORRY ... sad smiley or sad emoji coming in or a sad meme attached to that text. What does one make out of that? Is it a sincere approach of someone who can't really pick up the phone and call or meet in person and say sorry? Or is it just a fun way of saying, yeah, let me just say sorry?
I think guilt, just behind sorry is the emotion of guilt.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to admit it and nobody wants to face it. So sometimes it's easier to text sorry.
Okay.
One thing it can represent is that the person is wanting to say sorry, but they're struggling.
Okay.
In the sense that they want to say sorry, but they don't know the right words or they are being awkward about it.
Mm-hmm.
Second step should be that, yes, it should be followed by in-person apology. Anytime it depends upon how grave the mistake is.
Right.
Yes. I think if you think you've made a big mistake, it's best to apologize in person.
Of course, and that's hard for a lot of guys because they tend to find it easier to lie over the phone. But no, on a serious note, when it comes down to these apologies, I think that what is it about our human nature that when we apologise, we still want to lay blame? We want to say, yeah, look, I'm really sorry for what I said, but I was still upset about the way you treated me 2 days before.
Yeah, so that's basically assuaging yourself of the guilt.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, everybody has to take ownership of their behavior. If you snapped at somebody because of XYZ reasons, and when you're apologizing for that behavior, if you put, but I did it like that because,
Right.
you are completely negating the whole point of apologizing. So it's very important that you are mindful that you are basically trying to remove guilt from yourself.
So in a little battle between the men and women, we normally say that women can express emotionally better. It can the same be said about apologizing? Are women better at apologizing as compared to men, or the male ego comes in between and say, listen, I'm not going to say sorry?
Yeah, so I think I cannot generalize on the basis of gender, but you have seen some people for apologizing things where they don't even need to apologize.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's related to self-esteem.
Okay.
So if somebody has a very low self-esteem, you'll find them apologizing for things that don't need an apology.
Fair.
When people have an inflated sense of self-esteem, then they feel entitled. They don't feel like apologizing even when they've wronged somebody.
True.
Yes, nothing upsets me more than when you book the time for a meeting and someone is late and they don't come in and say, hey, I'm sorry I'm late. They go, thank you for waiting. It really annoys me. and is that what you're sort of talking about, that they don't want, they've got an inflated sense of self-esteem, so they think that, well, of course this junior worker downstairs on the radio should be waiting for me.
So I think when you are apologizing, it also needs to come from a place of humility that I have made a mistake. I accept my mistake and I'm saying sorry for it. Because I troubled you.
So, is there a difference between high self-esteem and ego? Or are they the same things and two different fancy words?
Yes, so self-esteem is a term we use in psychology, whereas ego is the layperson term.
Okay.
Or the same concept. But ego in psychology means something else. It's like a Freudian concept. But how lay people use ego and self-esteem, it's a little different. So self-esteem is generally a positive word where you are evaluating yourself and how do you think about yourself. That ego is generally used when somebody has an inflated sense of self-esteem, which is not rightly placed.
Okay.
That's when we end up using the word ego.
Well, what about a situation, when it comes down to... I always find this, there's a point where when people get upset with you and you reply calmly saying, are you done?
Are you alive after that?
It's a case of I think that when some people can be manipulating about this, obviously it and I think it goes back to those points you made before, Doctor, that it comes down to someone's own sense of self-worth, but also going further, probably a reflection of their own experiences, whether they've been through trauma or difficult situations previously.
So I think when somebody is being emotional or they are saying something that, okay, you've hurt me or everything, if somebody is being, are you done, it can basically means that it can be slightly invalidating, I would say. That this would be quite invalidating, that you don't need to feel all these emotions that you're feeling.
Right, but
emotions are too much.
Then there is another case where someone would say, yeah, I mean, whatever it was, wrong or right, but it got sorted in the end, right? So why do I need to apologize? So is it also about not admitting the guilt within oneself or thinking beyond that? Finally, the solution has come out and it's all okay. Now we are all fine. So there's no point in apologizing.
So minimizing what you are saying, the distress you might have felt, or being defensive or rationalizing what happened, or using, all these are ways of invalidating. Somebody's saying you hurt me. They're all ways of invalidating.
You mentioned a very interesting term over there, being defensive. And in conversations, you come across a lot of such people who use defensive tactics in conversations. And the moment you put a point at them stating that, hey, but this is something that you should have done, or this is something that is the right way to do it, they immediately get into their defensive shell. Is there a classic way to work around such people? Because we see such people and a lot of them in your work environment, and you can't really, hold them by their collar and say, listen, you're wrong.
So there's nothing wrong in being defensive. Defensive basically means that you're feeling attacked and then the person is trying to defend themselves. So if somebody is actually being told that or being blamed for something and they try to defend themselves, it's okay.
Okay.
It matters what you are defending yourself for. If somebody is just making a comment about something and you start defending yourself, that shows that the person is feeling attacked by something which is not an attack.
Right.
That's where so if somebody is being very defensive. So, for example, you're just telling them that these 3 things were expected out of you and they've not been done. You're asking for an explanation and they're being very defensive about it and blaming other people or something of that sort. Then they are probably feeling guilty.
Yeah, I had a grandfather who always used to say, I'm sorry, but that's because he was deaf. Sorry? There you go. Sorry. Dr. Tulika Shukla, we could talk to you for hours about this because psychology, I think, is only just being realised about the importance of it in our professional and our personal relationships. We do thank you for your time this afternoon and thank you for joining us on Talk 100.3.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, isn't that fascinating, the basis behind apologies and being sorry? And I think that a lot of it does come down to the way people perceive themselves. There's maybe perhaps their inflated sense of self-worth or maybe their lack of self-esteem.
Well, all of this, and also their upbringing, what kind of upbringing they have had, what kind of, conversations they've had with their parents. All of this, changes the exterior persona of the person. And it all starts from the very beginning of the growing age.
TSB, Talk Sport Business on Talk 100.